Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm here with Tim today. I'm in Tim's offices in the delightful Brixton. Before we start chatting to Tim, first thing we're going to do is say thank you for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening to either Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else you get your audio podcasts, thanks for being here with us. Really appreciate it. For us to get more people to be able to hear inspiring and engaging content from someone just like Tim, please make sure that you like, subscribe, give us 5-star reviews so that we can go up on the old podcast SEO. Now, last bit of housekeeping before we get started. I want to give a big thanks to Avonmore Capital, who are the sponsor of the podcast, and without whose support we wouldn't be able to do these exciting interviews with people like Tim that we've got today. Avonmore Capital is a development bridge lender and also providing refurbishment facilities from £250,000 to £15 million. And you can contact them on www.avonmorecapital.com, or you can also reach out to me. I am at property_funder on various socials, and if you want to reach out to me or you want to block me, that would be the way that I'd go about that. Now, without further ado, let's have a chat with Tim. Tim, what's your full name, and tell us the name of your business?
Cool. Thanks very much for having me. My name is Tim Lowe. I run a business called the Lowe Group. We set up 8 years ago. We provide meaningful social impact projects across vacant buildings. So typically developers, landlords, public authorities, taking buildings through planning or looking to be vacant. We come in there and we have a range of different services, from placing young professionals, key workers, creatives to occupy those for an affordable housing model, but also working with a range of artists, charities to provide affordable studios and exhibition spaces. At our core, we are about delivering social impact, while at the same time providing some really interesting savings to property owners from security, rate mitigation. If we can provide some income from it as well, we will do. So it serves two purposes.
And how did you get into the business? How did it come about? I mean, for those in our audience that don't know, I've been following you on social media. I've been following you for some time, and you had an interesting, was it a blog called the Lowe Cost Living that I think sparked it. But do you want to just tell us in your own words how we kind of got to where we are now?
Sure. I started my career out at Knight Frank. I was on a graduate salary at Knight Frank, not being paid a huge amount of money. I don't think those salaries have changed a huge amount over the last 10 years. And like many young people moving to London, I struggled to find good quality, but most importantly, affordable rental accommodation. I just started up at Knight Frank. One of my best friends was a property guardian living in an office block in Aldgate East, paying £400 a month for his room, and I was planning to move in there with him. My boss at the time, a guy called James Mannix, who headed up the residential capital markets team, got quite interested in this, and we started chatting about how many places did he reckon I could find for less than £500 a month within Zone 2. I was quite new at the time, so rather enthusiastically said I reckon I could do about 6 or 7. Subsequently, we then got the Estates Gazette involved, who got really interested in this conversation and this journey. My surname is Lowe, so Emily Wright from the EG came up with the term Lowe Cost Living. And off I went, and I basically rented 6 places for less than £500 a month. I'd move every 3 weeks. I'd write about my articles and record those. So I started up living as a property guardian above a quick fit garage in Gospel Oak. I lived on a houseboat. I lived as a security guard doing night shifts. I lived in a modular house. I lived in a housing cooperative. And then finally, we got really stuck on ideas of where to go next. And I noticed one of my friends selling muesli out the back of a horse box at a festival over the summer. So I borrowed his horse box, and I think it was Derwent who owned the car park next to Baker Street at Knight Frank's head offices, very kindly allowed me to park this horse box there for 3 weeks. And it was quite amusing because I wake up in the morning and go and shower at the gym just around the corner. And a number of the partners were quite confused by what was going on here. And what was very interesting about it was it really kind of showcased, what's out there for young people like myself looking to beat the system. The property guardian model, which I stayed in, was quite interesting because there was 20 of us living in this old office above a quick fit garage. I actually had a really interesting time and met some really interesting people like myself, but I found a real disconnect between the company which was managing the space, pretty substandard facilities, one shower, we had a big rat infestation issue, real sort of slight disconnect between people, us living in the building and those who we were effectively paying our money to. And then it was just very coincidental that one of our clients at Night Frank had bought a police station in Chelsea and had read one of my articles about it and said, could you recommend the company you save? And again, my boss James Mannix, who I have a lot to thank for, was very good about saying, look, if it didn't get in your day-to-day job, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't, have this on the side. So I set up, and it soon became apparent that this was taking up more and more of my time. And I had to make a decision. And again, James took me to one side and said, I was 27 at the time, no kids, no mortgage. You either start your business now or, you don't get that many opportunities like it. So it I got lucky with the fact that lots of these areas can roll into one. And I do something I'm deeply passionate about. I think that affordability is a major issue for London in particular. We are seeing as a business, we've grown to one people. We now employ about 25. We've recently lost 2 of our graduates who, one has moved back home. In fact, they both moved back home. One's gone back to Birmingham, one lives on the outskirts of London because they were struggling to find anywhere affordable to rent. Salaries haven't increased yet. Rents, when I was looking at a place in Brixton 10 years ago, I was paying $650 plus bills. You're now looking at £950, £1,000 plus bills. So we have a big problem, and I'm keen to try and do something about that.
Well, listen, it's a great story. I just want to dig in a little bit deeper. So when James Mannix said to you, look, maybe you should consider doing this, and then so it was the police station in Chelsea. Was that generating enough income was that going to be generating enough net income for you to be able to live off it? So for you to move from your grad salary to basically just being an entrepreneur, was or was it a bit of a wing and a prayer? Like, were you pretty confident that was going to be that you're going to be able to make enough to live off at that point?
Sure. I maybe foolishly, in hindsight, probably not so, but I'd saved a bit of money up, and rather than putting that towards a deposit on a house, I invested that all in our first project. Typically, we take the buildings on and we invest, and we take all the liabilities associated with it. So we invest everything into it. We try and make them pay back within the first 6 months. Building like Chelsea Police Station, we managed to have about 45 rooms there. So actually, we could pay back our initial investment quite well. Look, it very much transpired that if it was done properly and moved along in the right way, this could actually be quite a good business model, which we could scale up from it. We started with one building, we now manage 150, and that really varies between offices, warehouses, nightclubs, banks, care homes, residential stuff as well. And so our model's always been about everything we do is about self-funding the next project. We've never gone out looking for outward investment into the business. Interestingly, part of the probably thing I didn't tell you about, but when I took on this building, this police station for the first time, obviously the first thing you want to do is find some they're licensees, so not tenants, but so we call them licensees to occupy the building. And I put an ad out on Spare Room, which is a brilliant platform if you're looking for tenants, etc. But I put an ad out on Spare Room, and it got picked up by the Evening Standard. So here was me working at Night Frank, and I very much kept this as a bit of a side hustle going on. And suddenly, some of the senior partners had seen that my side hustle was slightly conflicting. So my hand was slightly forced in terms of do I carry on? I think, to be fair to Knight Frank as well, there's sort of a slight conflict of interest in terms of working with a client and also operating a business on the side. So, it was that advice from James. It's very much like, sometimes you need somebody who you respect and seeing it coming in there saying, here's an opportunity for you, go take it. Otherwise you might regret it. So I'm incredibly fortunate for his words, and Knight Frank have been incredibly supportive post that, and we get a lot of our business, a lot of referrals come through developers, etc. And so actually having those relationships has been fantastic.
Would you say you've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial streak to you? Did you have a sort of car boot tuck shop at school or anything like that?
I struggled with school, and I struggled being told what to do. And, I struggled with discipline. I think my parents are probably testament to that. And in the work environment as well, I struggled to be managed. I think for me, when you work for yourself, I'm very fortunate in that my wife works in the business as well. So we're very equal in terms of our roles and responsibilities. And you have to accept, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, I suppose is how I can describe it. And there's always stuff going wrong, and that's okay. And, not everybody can go to bed at night and deal with that. And there are definitely times when I look back and I see friends of mine who do 9 to 5 and clock off on the weekends. And, you run 5 businesses, so you must know this more than anyone, but you just have to be okay with multiple plates spinning at the same time. So as much as I at times look at having a more stable career, it's almost impossible for me to ever go back to that. And if tomorrow, the whole business closed down, I'd probably take a bit of time out, but I'd go again in some form. So I think once you get into it, you enjoy the freedom it gives you.
Well, I mean, you use the expression, you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You're willing to live in a quick fit with a rat infestation, a houseboat, to live in a horse box on a Derwent London car park off Baker Street. Living in a cooperative. I imagine you probably weren't desperate to say that you worked at a big commercial estate agency with people who are probably, shall we say, quite left leaning.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. You've also got to realise, I'm 36 now. And I'm married with 2 kids and a mortgage. Life moves on. And probably if you said to me, would you do this now? Slightly different on that. But no, of course. And I think also one of my big learnings is if you want to start your own business, you've got to do something which impacts you. And I was very frustrated by the fact that all my salary was going in terms of renting as opposed to spending on, what I wanted to do in my spare time. So for me, that was okay, I can see there's a problem. It affects me personally, and I can see there is a solution to it. All our stuff is meanwhile, we have to hand our buildings back, and that's the nature of what we do. So I'm not saying we're the solution to the housing crisis, but we currently have around about 1,000 people living with us. So we are making a small difference to a problem. And what's really interesting is when I first started out in this space, property guardianship was quite a murky world, quite a grey area. A lot of clients would ask, I felt quite misleading questions in terms of other people living. Are they homeless? Is it housing need? Is it, hippies not working? And what's really interesting is the quality of people we get coming into our accommodation right now. Everybody's full-time employed, super professional careers. And actually, for your grads at your Knight Franks, your Savills, all those guys, this is the only real affordable way to live, rent in central London. So the space has changed quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I can imagine that entirely. I mean, it's interesting. I've been quite vocal for many years about housing, but at the moment in particular, being one of the businesses that I'm involved in running is a strategic land business, and another business which invests in commercial property with the longer term goal of converting that into residential as well. And of course, Avonmore being a development finance provider. So 3 out of 5 businesses that I'm involved in effectively, directly or indirectly, are involved in the development of residential property. And I've been very vocal recently about the housing crisis, and particularly around issues with planning. It's just really interesting hearing you talk about the affordability issues. Obviously, I was also a graduate surveyor, albeit at what was Cushman & Wakefield, he in Baker, became Cushman & Wakefield. I think my starting salary was 21k, and I think I paid about, to live in Fulham or a nice place in East London, it was for my room, I think it was about 650 plus bills, and we're going back to 2004, so 5-6 years old. That salary is now maybe 25, 26 starting salary, not much more, but like you said, that increased cost of housing is just terrifying. And actually the thing for me is that the thing that frustrates me is that these high housing costs, they act as a massive drag on the economy, the wider economy. People ask why do we not have, why do all of our tech superstar businesses, why do they end up being owned or bought by American companies? Well, one of the major issues there, one of the major reasons behind it is that people in this country, they aren't able to put that into investment funds or invest in companies and businesses. They have to invest it in the bricks and mortar where they live, either by way of paying mortgages or paying someone else's mortgage as renters. And so I think what's quite interesting is that I feel quite personally aligned with your mission here. And certainly, certainly that's one of the reasons why I've been very fascinated by your story and by your journey. Can we talk, just because some of our audience will probably, some of our audience who are maybe earlier in their careers or maybe they don't maybe inhabit the property development space as actively. Could you just explain to people why property guardianship exists? What are the benefits to a landlord? And let's say a landlord is listening. Why would your business be the best guardian for the guardian option for them, for their property? If you could just
Sure.
Succinctly and briefly explain.
Historically, it's a Dutch concept. The Dutch, if you want to see whoever's leading the front in terms of housing, look to what Holland's up to. It started around the 80s. Look, buildings in particular London, if you leave them unoccupied, commercial buildings, they get squatted, and squatters have rights over commercial properties. It's completely archaic that you can't just kick them out and somebody just breaks into your property, but they are protected, so you need to go through the correct legal procedures from it. So rather than paying for traditional security, you would put a property guarding company to take over the management of that building and ensure that it's kept fully secured. But there's also other advantages, rate mitigation, and like I said earlier, if we can create some income from it. Where we are different, and we're not afraid to say it, we're very much place ourselves as that premium offering. So ensuring that we invest properly within the buildings, ensure that they're fully compliant with HMO standards, with the right facilities. And then on the other side of it is ensuring that the people who come into those spaces are really good quality people. We've got this mantra within the office that our housing is a platform for people. It is not a life raft. Now, unfortunately, if you touched on earlier, there's a lot of people in dire need of housing support. Unfortunately, that is not us as a business. If you were to give us a vacant property and you're going to work through planning in 18 months' time, I'm going to have to hand that building back to you. And as part of our license agreement with the licensees living in there, we give them 28 days and they need to vacate that property. So from our perspective, we are incredibly rigorous in ensuring that we have the right types of people who understand the short-term nature of what they're signing up to and have somewhere to go once notice has been given. We have a rehousing strategy around that to ensure that we can look after those with any other opportunities. But ideally, you come into one of our buildings and within 18 months, you've saved up money for a deposit. You've got in the private rent sector because you've found a group of friends within that space as well. And we've had some great success stories of that happening. And that's really what we're about. You want to use this as a platform to go on and move up through that space. So we're kind of at that interesting area where, from our point of view, we don't want to cut any corners, and we just want to ensure that you get us a building, A, we're going to look after it to a very high standard, and B, we're going to have some really great people who are going to really make the most out of that space. And actually, to be fair, our track record is testament to that.
Oh, awesome. What's sort of the minimum term of a term that you could take a building over for? I mean, you talked about a payback period of say 6 months. Is that the minimum, or
typically around 6 months? I mean, it's very interesting that we probably turn down 50% of the buildings we show. And when I say turn down, we can provide other solutions to it, be it that the fit out's going to be too expensive, it's too short term. The location, we are predominantly focused on London, the South East, so Brighton, Winchester, Oxford, Cambridge, Bristol. For the model to work, it works best in cities and urban locations where there are affordability issues. We're doing a big piece of work with the NHS at the moment, where NHS has a lot of vacant housing, vacant commercial stock. They also have a massive problem housing key workers, so especially places like London, where there are such big affordability issues. So we're doing some work with them at the moment where we are repurposing their vacant stock, particularly for their staff as well. So the model works best on those sides.
As someone who is a commercial landlord, I look at the rate mitigation as probably what I would see the most attractive reason for working with a property guardianship company. Could you just talk through the whether is that the main rationale for people wanting to work with you, or is it is it mainly the security and the squatter prevention?
I think it would be I think when you've got a vacant building and you're incurring costs against it, the rate mitigation can often be one of the highest costs. Security, if you're paying for manned security on a site and you're paying, at the moment, the London going rate's about £14-15 an hour, you're looking at 120 grand a year just for one security on site. So they can sort of add up. I think on the rate mitigation piece, and this is part of the other side of the business we do for this arts charity, which we partnered with, we're all about ethical solutions towards rate mitigation. So typically, your listeners might be aware of things such as intermittent occupation, Bluetooth speakers, which is intermittent occupation is us occupying a building for 6 weeks and then triggering a 3 months rates relief. I was having a chat with a client about this the other day, and we were saying, is that tax avoidance or tax evasion? It's one of them. But effectively, these loopholes which exist, which don't feel necessarily very good about it, but it's how a lot of people delete or mitigate rates. And I think as a business, we're really keen to work with clients who actually see that there's an ethical way of doing this. And actually, if it's benefiting people, this should be the route they're going down, rather than what's the most cost, effectively the easiest way of deleting from it. I'm going to give a bit of a shout out to a new client we just signed up, which is Newcore, who very interestingly, they had a building of theirs which was quite a secondary location, and as part of their B Corp credentials, they will not use any form of rate mitigation which they feel doesn't fit their core values. And it's really interesting seeing there is a change and a shift in organisations which talk about their ESG credentials, but then you start working with companies like Newcore who actually are really keen and purposeful to act against that as well. So we're definitely seeing a shift in clients coming to our services who obviously get the point around reducing costs, but actually see the benefits at the same time.
In terms of the longest duration you've found yourself in a building for, what's the longest you've been in a building for?
Typically, buildings go on. I mean, the longest ones have been sort of five years, around the sort of 5 year mark. I mean, that's not necessarily a great solution for our client, because that's normally meant that they've been rejected by a couple of times and then been sold during the process. So typically, if a client's buying a building and they're taking it from start right through planning, it would be between 18 months and 2 years, unless they've been quite badly knocked down. So that's often the kind of the model we run off.
And when did you move to setting up kind of more commercial sites, or sites which are not for residential occupation?
When we came through the fact that actually some of these sites from a residential point of view just getting them compliant with health and safety via HMO standards can end up costing too much money to make them viable from a residential point of view. So the commercial side can work much more with like open floor places, industrial units. And so that's been sort of simmering away over the last 3 to 4 years. And it's growing. And again, it's great to go to a client and say, look, we've got a suite of different options. What are you interested in? And some of our clients are super interested in that art space, exhibition space, so we can sort of create a bespoke model for them.
So yeah, talking about the commercial I suppose we call it a meanwhile space is one way of explaining it. That's actually something that's quite close to my heart, particularly because Avonmore Capital was born in a facility. It was run by a charity in the city on Old Jewry called Bathtub to Boardroom, and I think I don't know if you know, it's called Paddy Willis was one of the guys that ran it while we were there, but I think there were other guys behind it as well.
My first ever job before Knight Frank, sort of post university, I did 6 months working for a tech business, which was based in their one in Viner Street in Church.
Oh, okay, wow, okay, yeah.
I don't think it's going anymore, is it?
No, I don't think it is going anymore. But it was a great initiative. So we were paying £220 a month for a desk, literally a cricket ball throw from Bank Tube Station. And it was one of the reasons why we were able to grow and scale quite quickly, because we had as a business that didn't have a lot of cash flow, a lot of revenue in the early days. We were obviously trying to minimize our outgoings as much as possible. So to have a facility where, we could add people and add desks, and also lose desks very quickly as well. And ironically, actually, being part of that community is how, actually one of the reasons why Zaher and I were able to meet, because on the bank of desks that sat behind us was a tech company that was a double dating app that actually raised money off Peter Jones on Dragon's Den. One of the partners in that business was one of Zaher's best friends from school. Zaher had just left Goldman, wanted to get into property lending, and that just and actually just being part of that kind of communal business space, that wouldn't have happened if we had sat in our own 4 walls like this in a serviced office. Very cool. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for that style of business.
And I think there's a lot to be said for. We talk about this. It's probably quite a common theme in the offices at the moment in terms of post-COVID, working from home, working from the office, and what's everyone's policy towards it, and actually bringing people together. And I think that's where real estate has such an exciting space. It facilitates those relationships which you wouldn't have otherwise. I'd be interested to know what your feedback is on working from home. Across your businesses, what's the sort of general policy there?
Within Avonmore, I think we are a business that has gone back to 4 days a week in the office. I think we had a conversation about this when we chatted a few weeks ago, where I think you're pretty pro office. Yeah. I think the nature of our business is that, and I think it is as a knowledge-based business, you need to be in the office as much as possible, for the simple reason that the exchange of information between colleagues is so important. And, for example, let's say one of our underwriters is looking at a case, there's a particular challenge on the case. The underwriter can obviously review a case very effectively from home without the distractions of people being in the office. However, when the underwriter encounters an issue, he's got the salesperson or the originator of that loan sat across the office floor from him or her. He or she can go over and have a conversation with them and say, look, this is the issue. Do you want to have a chat with the client, have a chat with the broker? You can therefore communicate very quickly. But also the head of department or people or the senior credit officer who might be making the yes or no decision on that, they might be sat next to them or sat 2 desks away from them. And in that situation, they've got that opportunity to get in near real time a solution to that problem. In fact, the credit officer might be overhearing the conversation and go, hold on, I'll just stop you there. How about this? How about that? Okay, well, let's go away and have a think about it. Whereas if you're having to schedule a Teams call or a Zoom call to have those conversations or pick up the phone, which, by the way, I don't know if you've experienced it, but anyone under the age of 30 seems to be allergic to.
I agree. I think that age group as well, the under 30s, who've, I just think things like COVID, living in rental accommodation with 5 other housemates in your bedroom, I find it staggering that, and I think you often see that the young people, they want to be around people, they want to learn around people, they want the community which goes with it. And I think across the different sort of spaces which we operate in, including our own office as well, we've seen that as a real value-added piece. I wouldn't be that surprised if businesses start switching more towards, would you ever go to 5 days?
I think it's probably difficult to say that we would. I think we probably would stick with 4, but I think it would be increasingly would encourage people to come in for the full week. But I think the genie's out of the bottle, and it'll be very difficult to put it back in for most businesses for a full 5-day week. I'm actually having some frustrations at the moment with a bank that's looking to lend on a commercial asset that I'm looking to buy. And the 2 credit decision makers, they both work 4-day weeks. So that's the other thing that we're battling as well, is this concept of a 4-day week. Now, banker A works Monday to Thursday, banker B works Tuesday to Friday. So there's 2 days in the week, 2 out of the 5 days of the week, where they're like ships in the night, but they aren't interacting with each other. So you might present an issue to them on a Thursday evening. You can't get a response until 5 actual days later. I know it's only 2 business days later, but 5 actual days later, on the Tuesday, because they haven't had the opportunity to speak about that issue. So I actually think that that's probably the next thing that we've got to combat. I don't mind if people are working from home in our business 1 day a week. Because I think it's good that people have that mix. But I think 5 days a week, will be difficult. But I do think that from a customer service standpoint, and I appreciate not all businesses are the same, but I think from a customer service and customer experience perspective, I think we do need to stick with a 5-day working week. That's the one area where I'd say. What are your views on that?
It's interesting. I think with a 4-day week conversation, everybody needs to be all in on it or not. It doesn't work. And I think you'd end up having a competitive advantage, like you said. You've got an operator or like a client who's going to work 5 days, working 4 days. And I don't think as a society, the UK would be able to cope with doing a 4-day. I think it's going to have to stay on 5 days. I was playing tennis with a friend of mine last night who was out in New York for 5 years, and he's just talking to him about the American culture and how they work. And it's very much, you're picking your phone call up on 9 o'clock on a Saturday evening. I think that's gone too far. And there is, they get 10, 15 days holiday a year. I think that's not how we should be set up. I think, when you are at work, I think it's really important to be like measured and on it when you're there, and then take your time accordingly. We've kind of got a bit of a flexible arrangement. We've got a couple of team members who do work 4 out of 5 days, but I think when we've got we've taken all the graduates, we've got a scheme at the moment where we partner with a charity down in South London called Regenerate, where we've employed we've got a new apprentice starting today. And these are 18-year-olds not going on to further education. They've been involved in this charity down there, which is effectively a youth club and getting young people into employment. And for us, it has to be come on board 5 days a week. You need that training, you need to learn from people. And there's a lot of the soft skills, which I think often get neglected when you're a bit more senior, but just as a young person, watching somebody make a phone call, watching somebody having a one-to-one with somebody, having that kind of conversation around there, and they develop and learn so quickly. I just don't think you get that work from home.
I completely agree with you. And it's ironic. I actually think, from my own experience, and I'd love to hear yours, the people who've probably been most resistant to returning to the office full time are the people who I guess are probably closer to my age than the younger people. Because if I think, we've got a really young average age of the team, and I could think back to this early days of Zoom calls in 2020 and 2021, and having, and the younger guys living in their house shares in Tooting and Clapham and Balham and places like that, fighting over kitchen table space as to who was going to have who could have the Zoom call at that time, ironing boards behind them, and it would amaze me and it would astound me that people wouldn't want to come back to the office full time and or as much as possible or as quickly as possible when faced with that, especially when your commute from, your commute would only be 20, 30 minutes maximum. And I think it's the key thing for them though is I think we found that they've been most enthusiastic about coming back to the office and want to, because I think they want to learn. They want to learn from the more senior, more experienced people.
I completely agree with you on that one. Yeah.
So we're in a lovely building here in Brixton. Is this a meanwhile space or is this an actual lease?
No, we took a lease on it. It's an old furniture workshop, and we were in a co-working space in Brixton, and very archaic. It was run very traditionally, and I had a slight falling out with the landlord on it over. He was very anti people bringing bicycles into the office space. I won't bore you in the details, but we had a difference of opinion, shall I say, on the going forward. And I was out and about walking I've got 2 young kids, my daughter's 6 months at the time, and walking around Brixton, and I saw a to let sign outside this old, there's a beautiful grade 2 listed building right off Windsor Square. And what's very unique about it, it's got a covenant on it where it has to remain office. So it lends itself very well for a gallery, for a yoga studio, and the owners of it, so they're upstairs, they've got an art gallery upstairs. They're really struggling to find interest because not that many businesses in Brixton wanted an office like this. So for us, it's been awesome. And actually, in terms of talking about, if you want to have a work in the office culture, our personal advice has been, first and foremost, make it a space people want to come to and want to be in. And then if you can, put some add-ons in there. So we've got our architects who've inspired this. They do this, they do this program at their offices where each day a different team member cooks for the whole office, and everybody pays £2 in, and it's got to be vegetarian, and they do it every day. Now, I think that's quite extreme, so we do it once a week. So once a week, one of the team will cook for the whole office, and as part of that, we all sit down together, no phones, and nobody's allowed to talk about work. So it just gives a bit of connection away from day-to-day stuff, and somebody doesn't need to be particularly, anything special, a salad, a rice bowl or anything like that. We've got a very relatively small kitchen, and that's been really awesome. And the other thing which we've done, which has been really successful, is we've partnered up with a local gym. They do a HIIT class every Thursday evening, and we basically block book that with a personal trainer down there and do that and then go for some beers afterwards. And I think there is some kind of doesn't need to be anything special, but just some small add-ons which go quite a long way in terms of A, people wanting to come in, but B, just creating a level of culture which doesn't necessarily need to be hey guys, we're going to go on a ski trip this year, something like that. They can be small touches which mean a lot.
Yeah, but the word I wrote down was community. I mean, I guess you've been very successful at building and growing communities on the residential side. So it's sort of not surprising that you're building a culture, an internal company culture that feels more like a community than just a plain office that people go to work.
You're kind. I think anybody, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. The most challenging thing I've found in my personal journey throughout this, journey in this business has been hiring the right people and retaining the best people. And, we've consistently had to learn some quite harsh lessons around that. I think it's a very difficult space when you go through interviews. I'm interviewing for someone quite senior at the business at the moment, and, people are very good at selling themselves in interview processes, and then you get down to the day-to-day, and either there is a skill shortage or there's a difference in terms of their culture and everything like that. And I found that has been probably the area which we really found the most challenging. And when you get good people, anyone will tell you, if you get good people in your team, they're the difference between your business being good and being great. I think, and building that culture around that. And I spent a lot of time, so does my wife as well, thinking about different areas, how we can improve that, because, once you've got that team going in the right place and they're really bought into your mission, it changes the dynamic completely, as opposed to just coming in each day and, doing a 9 to 5 and clocking out at the end.
I mean, what would you say is more important? I mean, it's not an uncommon theme that the biggest challenges for business owners is people, is hiring the right people. But what would you say is more important? Is someone having the right skill set, or the right set of values and the right personality?
I think the attitude is just trumps everything, because, we've proved it in terms of bringing people on board who've had absolutely no property-based experience whatsoever, especially coming in very much entry level. If they've got the right attitude, in a small business like ourselves, they do very well because they take on more responsibilities and they want to continue to learn. We've often found actually that kind of more senior people, you go out there, you make some big hires as your business changes, and actually they might have the skill set, but if the attitude's not right, it doesn't match up. So for us, attitude is the number one non-negotiable. I got invited to a charity tennis tournament which Tim Lowe was putting on, and I went down there, and a friend of mine invited me down there, and Andy Murray was there, and Tim and Andy Murray are quite good mates, and he was talking to people. And I'm a big tennis fan, and I'm not a massive Andy Murray fan. I respect him. I think what he's done has been brilliant, but I respect him a lot outside of it. I never warmed him when he was playing. But anyway, Andy Murray was there, and I thought, I'm going to have to go and have a chat. I'm going to have to go ask, he's there, I'm going to have to ask him a question. And he's heavily involved with a company called Castor, which has really boomed, and they've done a lot of sponsorship across football, golf, tennis. And Andy Murray was, you'll see him wear this AMC brand, which he was one of the first adopters off it. And I went to go and have a chat with him about this business, because it's set up by two brothers, both one of them was Tranmere Rovers, they're kind of professional, semi-professional footballers, but they've got this motto which I think is absolutely brilliant, which we've stolen, because I think it's so applicable at anything, is their motto is better never stops, better never stops. And I think what's amazing about this is it doesn't matter where you are in a company, whether you're right at the very entry level, cleaner, reception, you name it, you're right at the very bottom of it, you can always get better. And I think that's such a powerful mantra to take, and actually to instill in people across it, that you can always get better where you are. And it was interesting talking to him about it, because he was very, and to be fair to him, he spoke quite a lot about it, and what he saw in that vision of that business, and probably part of the reason why they've been so successful is that relentlessness to keep on growing and keep getting better. Done very well, right?
I completely agree. I love that. It's sort of. I too am a big fan of tennis, and we're going to have to arrange a game. We'll have to arrange a game afterwards for maybe warmer weather. But I'm also a big cycling fan, and particularly the Team Sky era under Sir Dave Brailsford, and that concept of marginal gains. And it's the same concept, which is that how can I always be improving? It's the compound effects of that sort of small incremental increase in improvement. How are you going about integrating that into the Lowe Group? Then how does that manifest itself here? If that's something, the motto that you're adopting yourself.
In terms of from
how do you put that into practice?
I think you've got to be, I think in terms from a team and from a culture point of view, I think it's like we've definitely found this really powerful to be like just really transparent with everybody with where we're at, where we want to get it to and what that's going to involve in terms of that journey along the way. I think feedback is, again, this is something where I came into this business having, I was a graduate at Knight Frank. I was literally just pushing paper around the place. And you suddenly have to learn all these kind of skills and things like this, like feedback and giving good and bad feedback. I think bad is the wrong term. Giving constructive feedback, right? When someone's hasn't hit the levels they need to be and just being super open about it. I'm not the most confrontational person. And I think sometimes that becomes quite difficult because the natural reaction is you want someone to like you first. And then you get them to like you and then you have to give them negative feedback, constructive feedback. And it's a real challenge. But I think being really super transparent about that. And then I think also just being really positive about what does good look like, what does good look like? And I think celebrate success, and that can be the small wins. That can be, that can be somebody who's come with you from the very start of their journey and really progress forward. We have a maintenance team, so a lot of buildings manage, a lot of maintenance issues, a lot of them there in the shelf life. And through an organisation called Bounce Back, and then also through some connections within the business, we've started hiring ex-offenders. I say we've started, we've been doing it for 3.5 years, and I won't say his name, but we've got a really amazing success story of a guy who is mid-30s. He spent 8 years out between 20 and 30, 8 years he spent in prison for various different forms of drug offences, or you name it, right? And kind of keep going out of it. And he kind of got to the point where he was just done with it. And he started with us as a labourer, literally very bottom of it. And his attitude has been from the day he's been with us, he's just been super grateful for the opportunity. And he's just got better and better and better and better. And now he runs the project team. So when we get a new building coming on, he's the guy. He's got amazing leadership skills, which will probably, through growing up and making wrong life choices, you name it, haven't really shone through. And so for us, it's like being super inspiring in terms of like, what does good look like? What's better than us? And having someone like that who we can actually celebrate and go like, okay, we deliver a lot of social impact outwardly in terms of what our business does, but actually inwardly, and what do I take home from that is that positive story there of giving somebody an opportunity and seeing how far they go with it.
Listen, I absolutely love that. I really love that story. I mean, it's interesting to see you adopting that approach and know that Timpson, I suppose, how would you describe them? The guys who repair shoes and do keys and stuff like that. They've made it a massive success of hiring past offenders, and and I think it's I think that I think it speaks to your sort of social conscience as well. That you're putting rehabilitation in action is a really massive thing, because there's a huge workforce of people who are being overlooked by society. Or even if society isn't overlooking them, they themselves probably feel like they can't, that they probably feel less than and feel that good career opportunities are excluded from them. So to be able to make that sort of impact on someone's life is fantastic. I mean, you talked about this individual's leadership style. What's your mantra as a leader? What is your mantra? Are you someone who likes to be in control of a lot of things, or are you sort of more of a delegator?
I'd definitely say the latter. We've got a couple of very good leaders in our office, and good leadership is a real skill set. If you can manage multiple people and deal with multiple problems at one stage, it is not my forte. And we've got one colleague in particular who, the more we give him, the more he seems to flourish and just take it all on board. And it is a unique skill made up of life experiences. I personally, on a personal level, my kind of role and what I'm kind of focusing is very much focused around new ideas, innovation, what can we be doing differently, where can we be improving, where can we take on the opportunities on that as well. So I personally am much more focused on delegation, and I think also being transparent about it. I wouldn't put myself into the good leader category. I think there are natural leaders out there. And I think as a founder of a business, there's a big difference between a founder and being a CEO or an MD or a leader on that as well. And being transparent with your shortcomings as well, I think is absolutely key.
It's interesting that you say that you don't classify yourself as a good leader, but I've been doing a lot of reading around leadership, and the development of leaders within a business is actually something that's really important to me. Something at the moment, and in Avonmore we've instigated something called a Future Leaders Program, and I think the style of leadership that myself and Zaher used to employ was often, you could describe it as something like enlightened command and control. So you which is basically a way of saying we're in control and we tell you what to do, but we do it in a nice way. And I think actually increasingly, and it's something actually taught to me by my father-in-law, who was a good businessman and was an excellent delegator, which is that, if he trusted you, he just let you get on with the job. And it's still to this day, we work together, and it's sort of, I'm managing his money, so to speak. But he trusts me and he just leaves me to get on with it. And he just says, right, okay, how's it going? What are you going to do? All right, yeah, that sounds good, let's go. And my argument would be, sorry, and that's not me, but I'm not saying that just because I want to make myself sound and look good. It's actually because I'm hearing you speak, and actually I think you're espousing really great kind of leadership style, which is that you're empowering people to go and do to be great leaders. I think there's a misconception that a great leader has to be, Churchill style, banging and making great speeches and we'll fight them on the beaches type conversations. But actually, I'm not sure that necessarily is the right style of leadership for the 21st century.
I think if you want to grow a business, you need to learn to lead from the back, and that's definitely a challenge, right? And I think, don't get me wrong, now and again, you do need to have a director leadership. If you've got an area which is not performing, you do need to step in, take control and act accordingly. But the most successful businesses I've seen in real estate as well, the people who start them, or the CEO, the leaders from that, are very much leaders from the back. I had a coffee with Alistair Elliott, who used to be senior partner at Knight Frank, who's an amazing guy. And from my time at Knight Frank, one thing which really amazed me about him was he would say he knew everybody's name in the business, and he would speak to everybody, and he would know the cleaner's name, he would know every graduate coming in there. If you saw him around who's unbelievably approachable and always say hello and always remember your name. And it's a very unique skill. There aren't that many people who have that about it, but the impact he had on me, looking at it from a leadership point of view, but also countless other people. And I had a coffee with him quite recently, and I was asking him about his leadership skills and how he managed to really have that really clear mission and just ensure that everybody was on board with it. And it's just really interesting seeing it done properly. I think, like you said, some people think that you've got to be like on the front foot, the sort of, there you are, kind of shiny person right at the front, beating the drum, etc. But like, from my personal experience, the best ones I've seen is when it's been done the other way around.
Yeah, and I think so. I think if you're doing that sort of leading from the front style of leadership, I think it's almost an ego-driven. It's almost ego-driven in a lot of respects, and I think the sooner that we get that away from management culture within business within this country, and I suppose around the world, the sooner the faster businesses will grow and people will develop. And as someone who is very clear cares about growing and developing people, it's kind of good to see you espousing those values. I'm going to change tack slightly, and I want to talk about talk maybe a slightly more difficult subject, or have a slightly more difficult thread of conversation. You're a successful business person. You've grown a business really kind of from nothing to something really quite amazing, quite substantial, and having a really big impact on people's lives. But let's not go full survivorship bias here. Like, where were the challenges? When did were there any moments where you felt like, God, I need to give this up. I'm going to need to go. I need to go and get a job.
Of course. Yeah, I came into this business knowing I wasn't from a property management, building management, people management background. We had one scenario in particular over lockdown, which I'm very happy to talk about, where we had a large building in Walthamstow, and we had 50 plus people living in this building. And you can imagine, right, if you're living in a 50-bed former care home during lockdown, and you might feel that life's been quite unkind to you, and a lot of people losing jobs, etc. When I started the business, I was very keen that, we have really great relationships, maybe quite personal relationships with everybody living within our buildings. And in hindsight, we probably neglected that, at the end of the day, we are a landlord, and, people need to be managed accordingly across that. And in amongst all of this, there was an individual living in this building who's very far left thinking, very anti-landlord, sort of, part of a very far left group, which I won't go too much detail about, but effectively a housing activist in this building. Right. And he was quite remarkable because he is a very bright guy, and did a very good job on 3 separate areas of very much turning this building and the people in it against us, and effectively getting quite a lot of money out of us in the process. And it was a very harsh lesson for me, because from thinking that here we are solving problems, helping people, this series of problems presented themselves. And my wife had just given birth to our first son, and we had everything which could have gone wrong went. And it really made me question why we're doing what we're doing. And I think, every business, you go through situations where you have these disasters, and they are going to be part of what happen. But now I came out the other end, and all things in life, you get over it and moves on. I wouldn't change what happened in that whole experience at all. And it completely reinvigorated my belief in what we do and changed how we operated. And I'll be honest with you, we were probably a bit laissez-faire in places, and it made us do a lot of deep searching in terms of best practice, people-wise, across the business. And it really switched us from being a good business, I think, to being average to good, I'd say, to being a great business. And so it's funny, actually, because I often think about him and what he's up to. I quite want to write him a letter to say thank you.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that we have these, we have these moments of adversity, and they can actually be quite transformational for us. I'm picturing quite a kind of easy-going, happy-go-lucky group of people in your business. Everything's ticking along nicely, and you don't have to be the best of the best, because just things are working out. And then all of a sudden you have someone that comes in, basically a bit of a terrorist, and I suppose it was sort of a coming of age story, would you say?
100%. There's a classic line about winning. Winning is lazy. When you win, it's lazy. You don't learn from winning. Yeah. When I play tennis and I win, I feel relief, right? When I lose, that's what will make me turn over. And it's the same with business, right? When you lose out on something, or a competitor gets a march on you or something like that. And I think, what was amazing about this experience is exactly that, is it just created a resilience inside me now. When things go wrong, I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's been worse. So, I think you need it, right?
I would say so. We had this situation, I've talked about it recently, where we were being defamed by someone, and the approach that we took to that. And the approach that we took to that, and actually it was a super stressful time, and it was during the lockdowns, and or just after the first lockdown, and the market had sort of shut down, and you're worried about the future of the business, and you've got this sort of quote unquote terrorist.
Employee of the business?
No. It was a customer threatening to kind of just making life hell and making life very difficult, and you end up with constant calls with lawyers, and you're having to deal with trade bodies where complaints are being unfairly being made, and you're having to deal with that, and they're setting these sort of setting dogs on you, and then they're talking badly about you in developer forums and stuff like that, and it's all massively unfair and unreasonable. But at the same time, and they were so tempting to go. And he was threatening to defame us publicly on social media, and he was getting quite a lot of traction. And I was so tempted to just go get ahead. I was like, I want to get ahead of this. I want to go, and I'm just going to say, look, it's us. This is what he's done. This is someone he basically, I won't go into the details. He did something. He was very naughty. He was very naughty. Yeah, he was playing the victim, right? So, and now every single challenge that comes up, every time we have it was bad enough that basically the whole market shut down, our funding shut down. Somehow this seems to be the one thing that I remember that actually seemed to be the formative thing. But the ironic thing is that now, with all the difficult things that are going on, it's difficult to, doing business right now in our space is very challenging. And deals just, you think you've agreed a deal, and they die because valuation doesn't come back, or the monitoring surveillance report doesn't come back, or there's an issue with the legals, or whatever. But you sort of just take it in your stride now, because we've been through harder times. We've had more difficult experiences. You move on. Let's talk about the sort of the future of the business. So you've got 150 sites at the moment. Presumably, you have to work pretty hard just to stand still in terms of the number of those number of units. But what does the future of the Lowe Group look like? What are you aspiring to do? Are there any particular initiatives that you're looking to put into place?
I think from our perspective at the moment, we've had a good last couple of years. We've continued to grow year on year. We want to keep on doing that. I think there's definitely an opportunity for us to start slightly broadening out in terms of further cities outside of London, where we feel this model works quite well, and really establish ourselves in those sort of things. I think kind of a long-term feature for what we do is that all our buildings we manage are short term, right? We have to give them back. And so we'd also, longer term, we're quite keen to start looking at a model where we can actually provide long-term housing solution for people who we feel are, really benefiting from it. So I'm not fully bought into the co-living model. I think it's very expensive. It's my first and foremost my thing with it. And I don't think people, my generation, my age group, even us, I wouldn't be able to afford to pay £1,800 a month for a 14, 15 square foot room, a square metre room. I think you can get a better deal elsewhere, but I think there's definitely a model for a much more strapped back service, which doesn't need to have all the kind of shiny add-ons to it, which actually provides good quality but affordable long-term housing. So exploring some options in that space at the moment, so that's pretty say how to describe it. And it's how you make the model work. And I think that's the difficult thing, because as soon as you start having to get land values involved and costs involved in there as well. So yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think it's something which needs to change in real estate. I think the housing crisis is very interesting, because there seems to be there is a lot of building going on, right? There's a lot of building where I live around here. And you have to look at 9 Elms, for example, which is, I can now see it from my bathroom window, which is just exploded into this metropolis, and it's a wrong type of housing. Mm. Do you know what I mean? It's just completely against what I feel our society, what London needs. I think the idea of building housing, selling it overseas, and then just leaving it vacant is verging on criminal. And I'm kind of going slightly bit left in that opinion on that. But I think there's a frustration amongst my generation, which is that people can't access housing. They can't access rental accommodation. In my parents' generation, my parents bought a house in Shepherd's Bush for 25 grand, and that's just common stories hearing about that. And I think in our generation, if you don't provide adequate housing for people, they leave. That's number one. And I'm seeing friends doing that more and more of them going off to Australia, going off to other cities, or they go off on there. But I think, I think it's something which needs to be addressed long term, and that is going to need some government. It's the government are going to need to get involved in it, I think.
I mean, one of the questions in my mind is that if you're going to, I was going to ask if you're going to go to a sort of more long-term housing, because you don't have that. Because I guess if you're constantly having to work hard just to stand still, you're going to limit your ability to have that impact. Would converting to setting up a housing association, is that something that's been on your mind or something you've thought about?
I've had some interesting conversations. I know there's quite a lot of people out there at the moment in that space, and housing association probably not so much. I think for us, we would like to serve the demographic which we feel we represent, which is that unprofessional key worker creative, who are effectively on salaries between 20 to 45 grand a year. That's our kind of core demographic of people, and how can you create a model which works along that as well. So I think there's some, I think it's even looking at the student model I was reading earlier, that, councils are now putting restrictions on rents and growth from there as well. And I think there's going to be a gradual shift towards incentivizing people. And I think that's what it needs to be. It needs to be an incentive to build for a target. You obviously work on the financial side. At the end of the day, everything's got to stack up financially. People aren't going to build stuff because they feel it's a social responsibility to do, right? You're going to build what's going to make you the most money. So can we create a model where those two can align itself?
It's interesting you hear you talk about money. You talk about having social impact and having sort of social purpose. But is profit a dirty word in your business?
No. I think profit's good. I think profit shows that you are. I think profit shows you're growing. I think profit shows you're doing the right things. It needs to be profit with a purpose. Profit with a purpose. Interestingly, any small business will tell you you get your corporation tax, which will be going up. It's going up to 25%. I think that's coming in, right? That's a big chunk of any business which is making money. So you have to write off 25% on that as well. But I think actually paying tax should be seen as you've made a positive change in there as well. And it's very frustrating actually looking at the amount of businesses, larger organisations, and how different tax structures are set up, which seemingly negate that through their higher powers in there as well. So I think if we want to live in a society, and I think it's pretty obvious across a lot of our public sector services that paying tax is required. And I think if you can afford to pay tax, I think you should see that as your duty.
Yeah, I mean, I think every 3 or every 6 months, I end up paying HMRC some large sums of money. So. But
then I think I was just saying that my house got burgled, and we know one of my colleagues knows the person who's done it, and 8 days later, and the police have still yet to review the CCTV from our Ring doorbell, which is killing me. And you kind of expect, therefore, that when you do pay tax, that public services should be at the level where they should be. So it's a difficult one to get right.
And it's it did occur to me when you were talking about wanting to pay tax. There's so much. There's only so much tax you want to pay when you get, depending on your experience of the services that the government lays on for you, right? So, we that's a pretty spicy topic. We could have some fun with that, but maybe that's one for the pub. No, that's great. And then you've got 1,000 residents within your portfolio at the moment, and hopefully growing. Has that spawned any ideas about additional services or, I don't know, some sort of tech solutions? Because, once you start to get, I guess, a critical mass of a number of that many residents, there must be some opportunities to create some tech solutions that themselves will have some IP around that. Is that something you're working on, or just it's in the pipeline?
I won't say the platform we use, but there is a quite a clunky tenant platform, which is the main, when you start having a bit of volume of numbers against you, it's the main platform most people use. And it's ripe for disruption, shall I say. But it needs somebody with absolute focus and a bit of money behind them to get something right. And I 100%, if you can create a product which you can then white label to a business like ourselves, these tech products, when you've on these monthly annual subscriptions, we pay a big sort of money for it. So there are opportunities in that space. It's not quite what gets me going in the morning, but it's funny, I was having a conversation with someone this morning who's been looking at what we're doing and like looking to create something around those. So it's definitely opportunity, should I say, in those spaces. And when you come to sell those businesses, these valuations people seem to be sticking against 10x plus on these SaaSes just on the revenues. Like, wow, it's very lucrative.
Well, you'd say that. I went to a prop tech exhibition this week at the Excel Centre on Tuesday, and
was it good?
It was dreadful. I walked out after 15 minutes. Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think people have started to sort of wave the white flag when it comes to prop tech. The solutions that exist for problems that aren't that difficult. It's really disappointing actually how little innovation was on show, at least on Tuesday at the event I went to.
Was it big?
Not really. I mean, it could have been. I think the hall that they had hired, they only used about half of it because clearly there weren't enough exhibitors, and about 3 out of the 25 exhibitors were selling property in Dubai, or you could buy property with Bitcoin. And I don't know about you, but I think that doesn't look like the sort of innovation I was hoping to see and experience and get inspired by as someone with an interest in tech. So anyway, we'll move swiftly on. Let's start to wind down a little bit, Tim, because obviously we've taken up a lot of your time. But you mentioned tennis. Are there any other ways you like to sort of wind down and sort of maintain an element of balance in your life? Yeah.
I've got three main passions in my life. Tennis, actively playing tennis is one of them. Fishing is my main passion. I don't know. It's just the older I get, the more obsessed I've become. And sort of fish in the UK, but fishing overseas. I'm going to Venezuela in October and November. My wife very kindly gives me a week each year. So, and that is something which is just, I don't know, it just does it for me. I love the snow, I love skiing. It's a bit more tricky at the moment with trying to get 2 separate trips signed off by my wife. So I was supposed to be skiing last week, but sadly that didn't come to fruition. Just general, I love my sports. I'm a Fulham fan for my, I think Fulham's not a bad club to support. And when I was younger, it was great because I always get a ticket for it. It was cheap, and it's definitely become a lot more expensive. So I'm a championship. I like winning the championship is when we're at our peak. Because week in, week out, you never know what's going to happen in the Premiership. It's not so exciting getting drilled by City on your weekends.
You talk about your parents, and they were encouraging you to think about new ideas and that kind of thing. And as a parent of 3 young boys, my oldest being 13, maybe not the most academic boys, or at least my oldest isn't that academic. What advice, from your own experience, from your parents, what advice would you give to other parents in terms of, who maybe have got the less typical, less academic, more willful child? What advice would you give them?
It's a good question. I went to a very academic. My secondary school, I went to a very academic secondary school, and I was bottom set for everything, right? And it was a thing which kind of stayed with me that I didn't think that when I was younger. I think it's irrelevant actually at the end of the day. And I think if you look at like the top entrepreneurs and people making it in business at the moment, I don't want to tell young people not to bother with school or education or not to apply themselves, because I think there's a lot to be said for applying themselves and whatever that is. But I think our education system's got it so wrong. And when you're valuing somebody about effectively how well they can remember something, that's effectively what an exam is. A lot of times just remembering what that is and then thinking that's how it's going to translate. And it's really interesting looking at, I went to a boys' school, looking at boys from my school, like the really bright ones, and just checking out what they've been up to, like LinkedIn and years. And it's like, it's not the ones at the top who end up being the successful ones. And it's often the ones who are a bit quirky, a bit different, who might struggle to fit in, and I fell into that category to some degree, I think they're the ones who often end up thinking about things a bit differently. So, at the end of the day, it all works itself out, doesn't it? I've got 2 young kids now, so I'm like, from not worrying about that, I'm suddenly like, you want your kids to do the best, right? And depending on where they go to school or what goes next for them. And I think it's difficult for children these days because there's so much going on and like so many different pressures and so many different issues they've got to deal with, and it's sometimes just letting them just be like, okay, cool, you're a kind young person who enjoys hanging out with their friends. Education's not really well.
No. Well, there's a sort of almost as arms race as a parent, particularly in the current day and age, especially in London and the South East. And it doesn't matter even if you can afford to send your kids to a private school. Just being able to pay the fees isn't enough. You've got to work so hard just to get them into the secondary schools that you want to get them into, and actually, I really, really want to not be that parent that forces, that sort of got the whip, cracking the whip behind my kids, and actually want to encourage them to be creative and open-minded. But it's a constant battle.
I get that. I was reading about how much money people are spending on extra tuition just to, get, it's the done things. It's quite difficult when there's the pressure around parenting in terms of that. I mean, this whole, my son's 3, so hopefully times change from it, but it's like this whole kind of concept around mobile phones and giving young people mobile phones. They say like 11 is the age group.
Yeah.
A child shouldn't be having a smartphone at 11. It's not good for their brains. But when you're in a situation where all the parents do, because I'm assuming your 13-year-old has a phone.
He has a phone.
They have to. He has to. They're the odd ones out. But there needs to be a societal shift, I think, towards like letting children be children, right?
I completely agree. I mean, you seem like someone who's quite quite mindful about things, and I think my experience with my own, with my own kids is that, and I struggle with it as well. As I've noticed how, my youngest son's been diagnosed with ADHD, but I swear to God that I think I've developed ADHD traits. I can't focus on anything anymore. I constantly need that permanent stimulation that comes from the phone. And they are, the phones and devices. They are. I wouldn't say poisonous. I'd say they're bordering on toxic at times, and we maybe do need to, like you say, we need to have a reframe our relationship with them. Last question from me, which is, you talked about yourself being quite willful at school, but is there, if you were going to give your younger self some self-talk, some advice, what would you say to yourself and why?
It's a very good question, right? I think it's very easy when you're young to always be looking for like the next thing or what comes next, and probably like in this age of like worrying about what that's going to look like. I think tricky. I just think just enjoy where you're at, right? I think life goes so quickly, and before you know it, I'm now 36, which I still feel like I'm in my early 20s, and it's just like not worry about what that future looks like. And I think even now, so when we're talking about phones and kids and what's going on, just be present, just be enjoy where you're at.
Yeah,
we're very lucky we live in this country and we have all the opportunity, which look around the world where it could be. It's like sometimes very easy to always be looking at someone else with the grass always being green and just be like, just enjoy where you're at. Have fun.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, and appreciate that. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. If I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners will be fascinated by your story and your journey. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way of getting hold of you?
Just either send me an email, Tim at the Lowe with E Group Ltd.com, or if you want to hear a bit more about what we do, just go onto our website, LoweGroupLTD.com. And if you've got a building or if you've got some ideas you want to talk about, based in Brixton, always happy to come meet up for a coffee and have a chat.
Awesome. I've been Michael Dean. I'm at property_funder. So if you want to reach out to me, please do so. Otherwise, as I always say, if you prefer to block me or mute me, you can also do that too. Anyway, and again, thanks to Avonmore Capital for their sponsorship of the podcast. Thanks to Tim for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.